Good morning, educators. My name is Luke Morgan, and today we're going to be going over one of our professional learning standards, Standard 8.22, parentheses 2. We're going to be talking about the distinction between language differences and language disabilities. And while we talk today, our sort of guiding question that will lead us through the weeding that I want you to think about is what are we going to do as a district to not follow the national trend of placing a disproportionate amount of ELL students in special education. Now, uh, I have given you all a reference list of the readings, so you can sort of look at some of the figures and ideas I'll be referencing here. So, just to establish a baseline, I want you to look at the Abadai reading and see here that literature of assessment of English learners suggests that students' content-based assessment outcomes may be confounded by language background variables. And this gets at the broad issue of what's happening nationally when we diagnose ELL students for whether or not they should be in special education because they have a wealth of knowledge from a previous teaching institution, maybe in their home school or maybe just from somewhere else, and we are unable to access that content knowledge, and therefore we place them into a special education department, which is a waste of resources in a special education department, and then perpetuates a sort of caste system that is grounded in racism and unacceptance towards other cultures, which ties in nicely to if you go to the Klinger article from 2005. The main idea from this article is that a culturally responsive education system is one that is grounded in the belief that culturally and linguistically diverse students can excel in academic endeavors when their culture, language, heritage, and experiences are valued and used to facilitate the learning environment. Klinger talked about how we really need to not be trying to fix culturally and linguistically diverse students, but recognize those deficits as just an alternative base of knowledge and an exciting new reservoir of knowledge and expertise that we have to find our way to tap. So I want you to think about how can we get to these students? How can we tap their basis of knowledge? Mainstream educators generally interpret culturally diverse students' performance through white middle class normative parameters and competence. And this gets with the same idea from Klinger that a disproportionate representation of ELL students in special education is focused on judgmental categories in special education. And these are categories that are not, that couldn't be diagnosed by a medical doctor. So, things like not being able to sit still during class, things like cultural differences, like being late to class, like speaking in a certain tone or vocabulary, are all things that we all need to not consider at all when we're determining whether or not to place an ELL student in special education or not. That's sort of what I'm talking about when I talk about perpetuating this caste system that's founded in racism. So now for the some of the solution-based side of things, in some of the scientifically backed solutions that I have. If you go to the Blatchery article, you'll see that they say if a student has previously or recently received instruction in his or her native language, it will be important to access those skills using importantly trained bilingual staff to ensure that these competencies are not overlooked when all current instruction is in English. And that gets me to an idea that I think about. If we want to be different in our school system from the national average of failing our students and putting our ELL students in special education programs, we're just going to have people there on payroll that are willing to help us that speak our students' language that isn't English, right? So if we don't have that core level of infrastructure in our schools, then nothing's going to happen. So I don't care how we get it done, but we need to get an adequate amount of people in the schools that speak the language of the students so we can at least assess them, right? So we can at least talk to them in their language to assess what they know and don't know, so we're not wasting our time and resources. Um, and an important note from that same Blatcher reading is the more unique an individual's educational experience and background, the more educators must individually tailor the assessment. So, um, ELL students are themselves a diverse group. They've received a differing level of education from their home school, wherever that is, and they have a differing level of language competencies themselves. So, in that sort of intersectional, complicated puzzle of each student, we need to give the time and care to make sure we get the most clear and good idea of that student's competencies. So we can place them in special education programs if they need it. The goal is, the guiding ethos of this talk is to not place, excess ELL students in special education. But we need to remember that we need to have a good system that adequately measures our students. So the students that are ELL students that do need special education will have an opportunity to get that and won't be in a special education department that is labored with ELL students that don't need to be there. So, like many things in education, getting this right will help absolutely everybody involved in the school. The last article I want to cover here is from the NCTE, the National Institute of Teaching English, and they had some really good things to say about teaching bilingual and English language learner students. Writing instruction should support students as they compose with a variety of modalities and technologies, because students will, in the wider world, be using word processing for drafting, revision, and editing, incorporating visual components in some compositions, and including links where appropriate. Definitions of composing should include these practices. Definitions that exclude them are out of date and inappropriate. And so this reminds me that in our classrooms, it's important to try to distance some teachers from their love of semantics and more traditional English teaching practices like spelling and grammar, because the fact of the matter is many of these ELL students will have a huge amount of helpful software and help in their life, and I don't think it's sending the right message, and it's the most helpful for ELL students to just hammer down on these very rote and simplistic things. So that's something I really want to keep in mind when we're serving our ELL students as well, is that when we do assess them and we place them into our groups, and this is leaving our focus question a little bit, but it's about a holistic approach, and I want us to understand that when we do get them into their system, we want to continue stimulating them academically and not just stimulating their language learning, right? And that gets with this idea that this overarching idea of this talk, that language proficiency and academic and cognitive development is very separate, and we're not, we don't identify as an English-speaking district. There's no body of evidence out there that leads me to believe that if we need to hammer down on teaching these really specific and penalizing really specific English mechanics things. So it's important to keep to be a culturally diverse teacher. It's important to keep a culturally open perspective and understand that there are many different valuable cultures that we just need to learn how to access, and we need to really be better than the national average, and really look at their data as an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to avoid some of their pitfalls. So I've given everybody a lot of things to think about today, and I think that's a hard question, thinking how can we best serve our ELL students and not place them and accurately assess them for whether or not they need special education. I appreciate you taking about 10 minutes out of your day. I tried to be concise while still backing up what I had to say with good scientific research. And I hope you all continue to challenge your students and challenge yourselves.